Good morning and welcome to Travels with Monkey Boy. Today I take you back to April 1998. It's the Hajj season in Saudi, so it's the best time to get out of the country. Getting there, heading towards Nepal. If the words Pakistani air and 12-hour layover in Karachi don't strike fear in your heart, well, then you just haven't thought enough about it. Yep, that is how we started our trip to Nepal. Sure, there were alternate flights to get to Kathmandu through such reasonably civilized locations as Dubai and Muscat, but those flights were going to cost us an extra $500 and take us an extra 2 or 3 hours to our final destination. Besides, how bad could Pakistan Air be? I mean, they fly Boeings with GE engines, right? Right? And Karachi? The airport in Karachi couldn't be worse than the Cairo or Colombian airports, and I'd survive huge layovers in those places, right? So merrily we began our great excursion. The good news was that the flight left at a reasonable time from Saudi Arabia, 11 p.m. We again were traveling with the Clinks, Joe, civil engineer, Joanne, fiery tempered Croatian mom, Bethany, 7-year-old girl with short hair, creating massive confusion in Frankie's definition of the difference between boys and girls, and Matthew, 11-year-old boy who vacations with no hair. We were traveling with Jilreen and Alex and Frankie, who would have been, 8 and 6 at this time. Our first indication that we would be traveling through the fifth dimension on this trip was when Joanne called the morning of our flight and said that her travel agent had warned her to show up for the flight 4 hours early. I'm generally the only person on an international flight that's paranoid enough to actually show up the recommended 2 hours before departure. Remember, this was before 9/11 when people would show up half an hour before international flights. I asked Joanne why her travel agent would tell her such a weird thing, and she said he didn't say, he just said we should be there 4 hours early. So even before we left, I discovered there's something here, something about Pakistan Air, something so bizarre that all conventions of international flight travel are thrown out and are replaced by the rules of Pakistani Air. I spent the whole day convincing myself that I was not going to go to the stupid Saudi airport 4 hours before a 4 hour flight that brought me to a place where I would have to wait 12 hours to catch a 2 hour flight. My logical mind kept telling me that the actual check-in customs passport control, with all their corresponding lines and all the 50 plus international airports I've been at in my life, had never taken more than an hour and a half. 4 hours was goofy paranoia, and my family would be happier spending that extra 2 hours in our own house playing with their own toys. Okay, we left 3 hours early to the airport, but that's not giving in. It takes 20 minutes to get to the airport, and it would be imprudent not to leave a little extra time given the crowded nature of the airport during Hajj season. To fully appreciate our shock on arrival requires a little background. Pakistan is a Muslim country. It is one of the poorest countries in the world. The people tend to be very rural from mountainous areas and hard people. The men uniformly wear beards. They dress in this kind of pajama robe, a button shirt that extends down to the knees, and then matching colored pantaloons underneath. Their heads are wrapped in what could best be described as rags. The Saudis love the Pakistanis. They are cheap, they are Muslim, and they are willing to do the most grueling work imaginable. At construction sites throughout the country, you see these poor Pakistani day laborers moving around bricks, sacks of concrete, and the like under the blistering Saudi sun in temperature in the hundreds. The Saudis think of them as animals, and since they are animals, they are rarely given permission to bring their families over to live with them. In fact, outside of the very wealthy, I'm not sure there are any Pakistani women in Saudi. Since this season was Hajj, many of the laborers took advantage of the extra week holiday and take their annual leave back to Pakistan. So we got to the airport 2.5 hours early. Pakistani Air has 3 ticketing windows open, And there were these lines, long lines, lines full of hard, overworked, smelly men with their head wrapped in rags, wearing dirty pajamas, scraggly beards, and all with 12 pieces of luggage. Okay, luggage may be stretching the point. It was really more like garbage bag boxes and water jugs filled with Mecca holy water. Every man in line had to pay excess baggage free fees. Every man in line had to have it explained to him that he had to pay excess baggage fee. Every man in line argued over having to pay excess baggage fee. The line moved glacially. But we passed the time in pleasant conversation with various sales agents, security guards, ticketing managers, and people in line telling us we must be in the wrong line because this was the flight to Karachi. At one point, a kind-hearted Pakistani air counter agent told me we could go and check in at the first class line. This was the first in our many experiences of Pakistani air people offering kind-hearted but wrong-headed help. We were about third in line in a monkey class window, and a quick glance over at the first class showed a line of at least 5 hard, overworked, smelly men with their heads wrapped in rags, wearing dirty pajamas, scraggly beards, and all with 12 pieces of luggage. Maybe the men over in first class didn't argue so much about the price of excess luggage. Still, I wanted to show that I was a good, non-class conscious American and told them I would wait my turn in line. Another hour or so passed, and I was now second in line, when suddenly a man with no less than 10 passports in his hand pushed his way to the front of the line, dropped his tickets and passports at the ticket counter. Slowly, I began unsheathing my dagger when the ticket agent unexpectedly told the man to go wait his turn. God bless Pakistan Air. So even with the worst case scenario, I think the whole check-in process took us not more than 3 hours. In fact, I felt quite pleased with myself since the minute we got through passport control, we should have been able to step on the plane. I checked the flight board and it said that our flight was leaving on time, 11 p.m. But since they hadn't lit the boarding now sign, we went and greeted the clinks. They had come the full 4 hours early and had enjoyed the last hour and a half in the Saudi airport departure lounge. 11 p.m. came and went, and checking the big flight board still assured us we would be leaving on time. It was only at 11:30 that we were informed that we would be delayed for an hour. Quick to spot a lie, especially since I knew that to leave at midnight, we would have to be boarding now, I went back to the family and told them to trust in Pakistan Air. At midnight, sensing that the waiting passengers were growing bored and listless, and assuming a little exercise was what we needed, Pakistani Air suddenly announced that we were leaving at 12:30, but our gate was now 42 from 43. At 12:30, they sent us back to 34, and then finally at 1, they began boarding us at 42. Somehow, these hard, overworked, smelly men with their heads wrapped in rags, wearing dirty pajamas and scraggly beards, seemed to know the Pakistani Air routine. You see, the minute they announced that it was time to start boarding women and children, they could have used Jolene and Joanne's name for a more personal touch. 8 gates away from where they last told us we would be boarding, there was a line of 250 hard, dirty men lining up in front of us. A kindly Pakistani gate agent recognized that on the flight there actually were women and children, ushered us to the front. When we got to the plane, a Boeing indeed, and in answer to the trivia question, what does American Airlines do with their airplanes when they deem them too old to fly? We were told by the flight attendant that it was open seating. Picture the chaos of open seating on a full American flight. 250 people shoving and pushing to get to the seats closest to the front. 250 people fighting to sit next to the people that came with. 250 people tired from the late hour, frustrated from the long airport delay, and angry that their assigned seats now had to be fought for. Now picture the same scenario, but with 250 hard, overworked, smelly men with their heads wrapped in rags, wearing dirty pajamas and scraggly beards. 2 women, 4 children, Joe and I. All I can say is, bless that gate agent that led us to the front of the line. Still, for the unruly mob scene, this could have been, These hard men were well behaved. They took their seats in an orderly manner. There was no pushing, no fighting, and surprisingly, no smoking in non-designated areas. Frankly, it was far more civilized than a flight half full of Saudis. From that point, the flight was uneventful. It was 4 hours long and we all slept, or would have, except after the flight left at 1:30 a.m., they turned on every light in the plane. At 2:30, they came by in the most kindly way and woke us all up to eat a meal of rice and some part of a chicken that we in the US normally throw away. I guess the kids slept, but I don't think I got more than 8 minutes sleep at a stretch. We landed at 6:30 a.m., and because of the monkeying around in Jeddah, our layover was now more like 9 hours. And lo and behold, the angels sing. As we walked off the plane, we saw something that was beyond the scope of our wildest imaginations. The Karachi airport was a palace. It was incredible, fully air conditioned, the kind where you could almost use a light sweater inside, while outside it was rising towards 100. It was clean with high ceiling, carpeted floors. The lighting was bright without being harsh, and the chairs, oh, the chairs, beautiful three long attached cushion seats, perfect for laying down and taking a nap in. There was there was one of the best duty-free stores I've ever seen, run by an Irish company. Plus, there was a complete hall devoted to Pakistani arts and crafts. There was a delightful full restaurant and televisions placed throughout the waiting area that ran not only CNN, but the Discovery Channel and Cartoon Network. And if this wasn't good enough, the airport was empty. We had the run of the place to ourselves. So we gathered all this beauty in as we left the plane and moved towards the flight transfer desk. At the flight transfer desk, we handed over our tickets to Kathmandu, and the lovely woman behind the counter told us that since we had such a hard night and such a long delay in the airport, they would give us a complimentary day room that we could relax, take a shower, and maybe sleep a little. After our nap, Pakistani Air was providing us with a free lunch. I protested that we didn't even have visas to get into Pakistan, and the woman assured us that it was all taken care of for us. She then had a man walk us through customs and hand us to the hotel shuttle bus. I know you think I'm making this up, but I swear it happened just this way. By 7:15 in the morning, I was singing the praises of Pakistan. Organized, friendly, helpful, and willing to do the little extra to make us comfortable. Geez, I don't know where our country gets its bad reputation. As we left the air-conditioned splendor of the airport building, we walked into the tropical heat of Karachi. Karachi is a city of approximately 12 trillion people that sits on the coast of the Arabian Sea, a subset of the Indian Ocean. At this time of the year, by 7:15 in the morning, it's about 90 degrees with 90% humidity. We were accompanied by our guide and two porters carrying the Clink's luggage. We had checked our bags all the way through. The Clinks, I guess, prefer the excitement and competition of baggage retrieval and the long waits in line to recheck the bags. Our host took us to wait for the hotel shuttle bus that would come every 5 minutes. Feeling flushed with our good fortune in Pakistan, a adorable little Pakistani girl, poor little girl, maybe 4 years old, came up to me and put her hands out in a little cup and said, "Please, mister." So I reached into my pocket and gave her 5 Saudi riyals, a little bit more than $1. About the same time, the porters whispered to Joe that they needed 100 Saudi riyals apiece, about $25, for their service. Joe, also feeling joy at the smoothness of our feared stay, was about to pay them. Joanne, overhearing this extortion, went all Slavic on them. 100 riyals for carrying our bags 100 steps? You damn cheaters. She was about to call over the police, who probably would have asked for 200, when our hotel guide scolded the men in Urdu, and I think Joe ended up paying them 10 apiece. It was now about 7:30. There was no bus in sight, and all of a sudden, the little girl who had run off brought back with her waves of beggar children. Apparently, She told her friends, and they surrounded me, reaching out their hand, asking for more. We were all tired from the flight, and God, it was hot. And though none of us expected it, Joe went and did it. He gave one of the little kids 5 reals to go away. He did go away to get more friends. It was now 7:45, and we had waited half an hour in the heat. We were $10 poor for no discernible reason, and there was still no bus in sight. There were now waves and waves of poor children pulling at our elbows, asking for 1 rupee. Every everything was dirty, and I smelled bad. Finally, I told our hotel guide that if the bus wasn't here in 5 minutes, remember, bus comes every 5 minutes, I was going back inside. No, no, sir, it will be here any minute. Indeed, within 10 minutes, the bus finally came. It was an old and small bus, and within 15 seconds of it pulling up, a dozen nimbler and more experienced Pakistanis had hopped on and filled up the bus. Just as I began unsheathing my dagger, our hotel guide began grabbing people, shouting at them in Urdu, and physically throwing them off the bus to make room for us. My democratic spirit winced at this, but I was also damned if I was going to wait another hour for the next minibus that comes every 5 minutes. We all squeezed on. Our hotel guide wished us farewell and told us he would meet us at the departure gate at 12:30 to ensure our smooth departure. Joreen has often reminded me of the hotel we stayed at on our move from Baltimore down to Birmingham 15 years ago. Regalware picked up the bills, but since I was new with the company and because I hadn't planned things out very well, we ended up in a dirty rural Tennessee hotel on the transit. This place was disgusting, but what made it special was that the carpets were so sticky from God knows what that our shoes stuck to the floor as we walked. Joreen said that no matter what happened in our married life, she would never again stay in a hotel where her feet stuck to the floor. The hotel was the Ritz-Carlton compared to this day room. The lobby was nice enough, kind of a 1950s Holiday Inn. I mean, a Holiday Inn that hadn't been refurbished in 40 years. Still, we couldn't help notice as we walked to our room that this place looked a lot like an old prison. There was even a sign pointing to the infirmary, but the room was a Dickensian nightmare. There were no sheets covering the stained mattress. There were pillowcases where you could count the number of people that had used them because of the different colored sweat marks. With the aid of a loud air conditioner blowing out dirty, hot air, the 100-degree swamp outside was rendered an 85-degree swamp in the room. There was a single desk with a pitcher of water on it. There was a shower room and a toilet room. Frankie was quite pleased because the cockroach in the shower was so enormous, but Alex thought the one in the toilet room was bigger. Of course, those were only the ones we saw on first opening the door. The smarter and nimbler ones scurried away when we came in. Alex and Frankie rightly didn't want to lay in the bed. Lice, bedbugs, silverfish. So they contented themselves coloring. Jilreen laid down and promptly fell asleep. I was so dirty from the flight and so sweaty from the courtesy shuttle to our free day room that I went and stood in the shower room for a few minutes trying to contemplate if I could do the unthinkable. But after watching the flora and fauna in the shower room, I decided that getting clean in the room wasn't an option. I too would try to sleep. In a triumph of exhaustion over good sense, I did fall asleep. I would think I slept for a half an hour or 40 minutes. The children, bless their little hearts, were quietly coloring as we slept on the stain-colored covered mattresses. When the kids saw that I was awake, they announced that they were starving. I decided there was no sense in hanging in the room, so the three of us ventured out into the heat to find our free meal. A decision that was a triumph of optimism over good sense. The cafeteria showed the egalitarian nature of the Pakistanis. They are not afraid to sit down and share a meal with anyone, regardless of religion, race, creed, or exoskeleton. I saw man and bug elbow to elbow in a way that would have warmed Kafka's heart. The food was self-service buffet style. There were 12 metal covered serving trays, of which 3 offered food that had been heated at some time in the morning. In one was what appeared to be a toast-like product. In the second, there was a scrambled egg colored amalgamation. And in the final was a vegetable stew reserved insect seeding combination. In an effort to show my worldliness, I decided not to throw up. I convinced the children that peanut butter and crackers back in the room was a better option. When we got back to the room, the children opted for sitting outside, in the heat, on the ground, in the dirt, over the room. Seeing the wisdom in their way, we decided to go back to the airport. Of course, it took us the better part of an hour to get there, but we finally made our way back. Our friendly guide reappeared and helped us through the ticketing area. Joe, being clearly out of his mind, tipped this guy $25. So in the end, this 5-hour day room cost us $35. But on the bright side, it cleared up a whole lot of things for me about Pakistan. Nice people, well meeting, bad decision making, bad follow through. The rest of our journey was uneventful. We had a very nice meal at the airport, shopped in the beautiful stores, luxuriated in the air conditioning, and left on time, 1 hour late. Okay, that is the story for today. Let me real quickly bring you to the map so you can understand what's going on. Remember, we were living, there's America, there's home back here, but we were living in Jeddah on the Red Sea. We flew to Karachi, and then from Karachi, we flew to Kathmandu. No pictures to share from this one. We will talk again tomorrow. Thanks for coming. Bye.